This is Andre. He captured my heart. The moment I met him, I fell in love with this kid. I wanted to take him home, actually. He is 7 years old. The first time I met him was at the WJR-supported TIKVA program that was created to care for Jewish children with mental and physical disabilities. TIKVA in Hebrew means hope. He has an older brother and sister who are also mentally disabled. This family was discovered by the Jewish community only 4 months ago. The 3 children never went to school. The state has no social services for children with disabilities. They rarely left their flat and never made friends with other children. The only help the state provides is a monthly pension of £4 a month. That is all. After suffering from a long illness, their mother, Lena, died last January. And the children were very close to her, very attached to her, and it was a huge loss. But they never cried. They just shut off and closed down, and it was a very painful time, and it remains that way. And after her death, their elderly grandparents, who are in terrible need themselves, moved out of their home to move into the home of the children to care for them. And this is where they live. This is their one small room flat. And that is Andre's brother and sister, Dima and Ira, sitting in the back. Andre's only toy is an empty disposable cigarette lighter that he had found in the street. And he showed that to me. He was fascinated by my camera, and I let him run around and play with it. And then he decided that he would create one of his own, with his own 2 hands, which he had done here, as you can see. He always carried around with him an old photograph of his brother and sister when they were children. And he would pull it out of his pocket and say, "This is my Dima, this is my Ira, here they are." And they were so close to each other, and he was so proud of them. And his grandmother, Nina, told me that the children have always been very close to one another. She said that if they had one piece of candy, they would divide it by 3. Andre has 1 pair of shoes that are too large and too worn. Nina was very concerned about the winter coming on. She shares 1 coat and 2 sets of clothes with her granddaughter, and they need to take turns going out, especially in the winter. This family has been struggling to survive for many years. Their needs are enormous, they're immense. Hesed responded instantly by delivering WJR food packages to the children. Then they sent home care workers to help Nina clean and scrub the entire flat. The kitchen had been unusable for many years. The water heater has been broken for months, and they bathe by heating water in a pot. At first, Nina told me that she was suspicious and in disbelief. She never believed that anyone would actually care enough to help. And she told me that these acts of loving kindness have lifted her spirit. Sadly, Dima and Ira cannot attend the Yadid program, which is a continuation of the TIKVA program for adults, and it is an incredible program. It's one of my favorites. And Hesed does not have the funds to provide transportation. They don't have the money to pay for the bus fare. Their grandfather works sweeping the streets in order to make ends meet. And their grandmother broke her arm months ago, and it hasn't healed, and they need someone to take them. Unfortunately, Andre and his family are not alone. There are thousands of Jewish children in terrible need, at risk, who need our help. And this is Nuhim, the man I told you about, the man who I made the promise to 7.5 years ago. And his wife, Olga, who has been bedridden since 1 year after the meltdown at Chernobyl. The doctors have been unable to diagnose her, and all she does is moan and rock and cry infant-like, unable to care for herself. And Nuhim is completely devoted to her. They have been married for more than 50 years. A few months before I took this photograph, he had broken his leg, and it never healed. And he was in terrible pain, but he insisted to me that he demonstrate how he danced like a gypsy when he was discovered hiding on a farm by Ukrainian police when he was 16 years old. He is the only survivor in his family. He witnessed the murder of his 2 younger brothers and 6-year-old sister, and his parents were taken away, never to be seen again. A moment before he saw one of his brothers killed, his brother grabbed him and hugged him and told Nukim to run and not to look back and not to stop. And Nukim began running, and he looked back, and he watched his brother get shot in the back and tied and dragged away by a horse. And then he continued running, making his way all the way to this farm. And the farm owner knew that he was Jewish, but he was getting free labor, and he liked the way he milked his cows, and he liked Nukim, and he wanted to help him. And one day the Ukrainian police appeared, asking the farm owner, "Who is this dark little boy?" And he said, "Oh, he's a gypsy." And they were drunk, and they said to Nukim, "Dance for us." And so he danced for them, as he did for me on that day so many years before. And they handed him a bottle of vodka, and they told him to drink it. And Nukim never had a drink of alcohol in his life, but he told me he knew that if he left one drop, they were going to kill him. So he drank it, and he could barely stand. And they laughed and said, "Oh, he can't be a Jew." And they left. And this is one time out of many that Nukim was able to survive by his very wits. In this cabinet are all of their possessions, everything that they own. The photographs on the upper right-hand side of the screen are of Olga and Nukim in younger, happier, healthier times. And the photograph to the left of that is of their only son, Anatoly, who died at the age of 50 from asthma. And it turns out that Anatoly was neglecting his own needs in order to care for his parents at the end of communism, because money was scarce. They lost their life savings. Every person that I met, I left several $100s for. I didn't hand it to them because I didn't want to embarrass them, but I would slip it somewhere where I knew they would find it. And Nukim is someone that I gave more to because I saw his needs. He needed a heater, and there was medication that he didn't have access to that I knew was expensive. And I told him to go out and buy these things. And when I returned home, I called him up with a translator on my first telephone call. And he began crying the moment he heard it was me. And he said that he needed to tell me that he had spent some of that money on things other than the medication and the food. And I couldn't imagine what he had purchased. He told me that he had gone out to buy a gravestone to mark the gravesite of his only child, Anatoly. You know, we here in this room will never have to decide between tombstones and food and medicine. We can afford that and so much more. But it meant that much to him to be able to honor his son. And that is something that will always remain with me, that he did that. And this is the last photograph. Nukim was eventually discovered on that farm, hiding by the Nazis. And they found him, and they put him in a ghetto with many other Jews. And they had a pact, they had an agreement, that if anyone survived, they had to go out into the world and let everyone know what happened to the Jewish people during this time. And Nukim was the only person who survived. And on my last day when I was with him, we were sitting on the floor together, and he told me this, and he hugged me, and he said, "I'm not going to live forever." He said, "Now I pass this on to you. And now I pass this on to each of you in this room. Not only must we remember the horrors and the injustice suffered by the Jewish people at that time, but we need to know and honor their lives today and recognize how great their needs are, and that the injustice hasn't stopped, and how much they still suffer, and how much they need us." Nukim embodies hundreds of thousands of elderly Jews across the entire former Soviet Union that are our family, that need us, and that rely on us through WJR. I always wonder, what is the real value of $1, of a shekel, of a pound, if it cannot save a human life? What value does it have if it cannot do that? I am not a wealthy person, But ever since that day, more than 7 years ago, I could easily say, and I stopped counting after spending $50,000 helping these people, and I will continue doing it. I will do it until I am penniless, because it matters that much. These people need our help. I cannot say that I, as a Jew, am obligated to help, because I'm not Jewish. But I, as a human being, am to respond to their needs and to do all that I can do to help them. They have no voice. I cannot fulfill this promise that I made to Nukim without your help. I am only one person. But what we can do collectively, all of us in this room, can make an enormous difference. I have seen it. Where WJR funds goes saves lives. I have seen it time and time again. And thank you to all of you. And thank you to WJR for the work that you do. You have been saving Jewish lives since 1933, and it is an extraordinary organization. On this first night of Hanukkah, please help me to bring hope and light and justice to those who need us most. Thank you.